All right, so I know you love to learn new things, but hate feeling overwhelmed with too much information.
Yeah, that's a common feeling.
And you're here because you want to become fluent in English.
Right.
Thankfully, you've come to the right place.
Indeed.
We've been digging deep into some insightful research on language acquisition.
Fascinating stuff.
And believe it or not, it all boils down to just two key things.
Two things. Really, just two things.
I'm intrigued.
So tell me, what are those two magic ingredients to fluency?
Well, they're not exactly magic, but they are surprisingly effective when used in tandem.
Okay.
The first is immersion, and the second is speaking practice.
Immersion and speaking practice.
That's right.
Okay. That makes sense at a high level. But how does it actually work? I mean...
Well, think about it. How do children learn their first language?
Oh, that's a good point.
They don't, crack open a textbook or memorize verb conjugations, do they?
Definitely not.
It's all about being surrounded by the language and absorbing it naturally.
Yeah, just like soaking it all up. Exactly. It's like their brains are just constantly taking in language from their surroundings.
Interesting.
And that's the essence of immersion, creating an environment where you're constantly exposed to English.
So how do we recreate that immersive experience as adults?
Yeah.
I mean, we can't exactly go back to being babies, can we?
Right. But we can still kind of hack our brains a bit.
Okay.
And there are some surprisingly easy ways to do it.
Like what?
Have you ever considered changing the language settings on your phone or computer?
You mean like switching my phone and computer to English?
Exactly. It might seem like a small change,
Yeah.
but it can be really powerful.
Okay.
Research shows that even passive exposure, like reading menus and notifications in English, can actually trigger your brain to start recognizing patterns and absorbing new vocabulary.
So it's like tricking my brain into thinking I'm in an English-speaking environment, even if I'm just scrolling through Instagram.
Precisely.
Clever.
And speaking of Instagram, social media can be a fantastic tool for immersion.
Okay, how so?
What if instead of just aimlessly scrolling, you followed some English-speaking creators that you admire? Comedians, artists, educators, anyone whose content you find engaging.
Ooh, that's a good idea. I'm always looking for new accounts to follow.
Right.
And now I have an excuse to spend more time on social media.
That's the spirit. It's all about finding ways to make English a natural part of your life rather than something you have to force yourself to study.
I like that.
And there are so many ways to do that, even if you don't live in an English-speaking country.
So we've got social media device settings.
Yeah.
What are some other ways to create that immersion experience?
Well, have you ever tried listening to podcasts or audiobooks in English?
I have, but I sometimes get discouraged because I don't always understand every single word.
And that's totally normal.
Okay.
You don't have to understand every single word to benefit from the experience.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, research suggests that encountering unfamiliar words in context can be more effective for learning than memorizing lists of vocabulary.
Wait, really? Why is that?
Well, when you come across a new word in a podcast or audiobook, your brain has to work a little harder to figure out the meaning, based on the surrounding words and the overall context.
Yeah.
And that active problem-solving process helps the new words stick in your memory.
It's like my brain is doing a little workout every time I listen.
Exactly.
Cool.
And the more you listen, the stronger those language muscles become.
I like that.
You'll start to pick up on those subtle nuances of pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm that make English sound so natural.
Okay, I'm definitely starting to see the power of immersion. It's like creating this constant stream of English input that's slowly but surely shaping my brain.
You got it. And speaking of shaping your brain, let's move on to the second key element, speaking practice.
Okay.
Because while immersion is great for building a foundation, fluency requires actually using the language actively.
It makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't expect to become a great musician just by listening to music, right? You have to actually play an instrument to develop those skills.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Speaking practice is like playing the instrument of language.
Oh, I like that.
It helps you develop muscle memory, improve your pronunciation, and gain confidence in expressing yourself in English.
But isn't it kind of intimidating to speak a language?
Yeah.
You're still learning, especially if you're not used to making mistakes.
It's totally understandable to feel that way.
Right.
But here's the thing, making mistakes is actually a crucial part of the learning process.
Really?
Yeah, some researchers even believe that mistakes are how our brains solidify new neural connections.
So the more mistakes I make, the better I'll learn.
In a way, yes.
That's good news for me.
The key is to embrace those mistakes as opportunities for growth.
I like that.
Don't be afraid to experiment with the language, to try out new words and phrases, and to put yourself in situations where you have to speak English, even if it feels uncomfortable at first.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
It's like giving myself permission to be a beginner again.
That's the spirit.
Yeah.
And there are so many fun and effective ways to get that speaking practice.
Like,
you could find a language partner, use AI chatbots, or even talk to yourself in English.
wait, talk to myself. That sounds a bit unusual.
It might sound strange, but it's actually a really powerful technique.
Yeah.
Trust me, you're not alone.
Right.
Many language learners find that talking to themselves helps them to process new vocabulary, internalize grammar rules, and develop fluency without feeling self-conscious.
So it's like having a private rehearsal space where I can practice my English skills without judgment.
Precisely. It's a safe space to experiment with different accents, try out new phrases, and even have imaginary conversations in English.
You've convinced me. Talking to myself, it is.
Great.
So what are some other strategies for getting that crucial speaking practice?
Well, that's what we'll unpack in part 2.
Stay tuned.
So we talked about immersion,
Yeah.
but how do we actually start speaking more confidently?
Okay. Yeah, it's time to get to the practical stuff.
Right.
How do we put this into action?
Well, one of the action steps that stood out to me from the source material was finding a language partner.
Oh, the good old language buddy system.
Exactly.
Does that really work?
It absolutely does. There's just something so powerful about having those real-time conversations with another person, you know?
Yeah.
It forces you to think on your feet,
Right.
adapt to different speaking styles, and actually use the language you've been learning.
It's like taking your English skills out for a test drive.
Exactly.
But finding a language partner can be tough, especially if you don't live in an English-speaking country.
That's true. But thankfully, technology has made it easier than ever to connect with people all over the world.
Okay.
There are so many platforms and apps dedicated to language exchange.
Oh, right.
You know, you can find someone who's learning your native language,
Uh-huh.
and you can help each other out.
It's like a language swap.
Exactly. A mutually beneficial language swap.
I like it. You get to practice your English, they get to practice your language, and you might even make a new friend in the process.
Precisely.
Cool.
And who knows, maybe someday you can even visit each other and practice your language skills in person.
That would be fun.
So that's language partners. But let's say you're not quite ready to jump into a full conversation with someone.
Yeah.
Have you considered AI chatbots?
Oh, yeah, we talked about those before, right?
We did. But they're not just for immersion.
Okay.
They can also be really valuable for speaking practice.
Mhm.
Technology has come a long way.
Yeah, for sure.
These chatbots can actually hold surprisingly natural conversations.
Wow.
They can understand different accents, and they can even correct your grammar.
Really? So it's like having a personal language tutor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Available 24/7.
Awesome.
And it's a lot less pressure than talking to a real person.
No awkward silences.
Exactly.
Oh, that's back.
It's a great way to practice, experiment, and build your confidence before you start having those real-life conversations.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've got language partners, we've got AI chatbots. What about something like shadowing?
Shadowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. That's a great technique.
Is it kind of like what actors do when they're preparing for a role?
It is similar. Basically, you listen to a native English speaker. It could be a podcast, audiobook, YouTube video, anything really.
Uh-huh.
And you try to repeat what they're saying as closely as possible.
So like mimicking their pronunciation and intonation.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It might feel a little strange at first,
Yeah.
but it's an incredibly effective way to train your mouth and your ears to work together.
Okay.
It helps you internalize those subtle nuances that you just don't get from a textbook.
Cool. So it's like turning passive listening into active practice.
Precisely.
And I bet it can be pretty entertaining too, depending on who you're shadowing.
Absolutely. You can shadow comedians, singers, motivational speakers, whoever you find inspiring.
I like that.
Now, another powerful tool for self-improvement is recording yourself speaking English.
Ooh, recording myself. I don't know about that.
I know it can be a little intimidating.
Yeah.
But trust me, it's worth overcoming that initial discomfort.
Okay.
It's like holding up a mirror to your speaking habits.
Hmm.
You might be surprised by what you hear.
I can imagine. Like, I might notice mistakes that I wasn't aware of before.
Exactly. Pronunciation errors, filler words, things like that.
Right.
It's all about self-awareness. And once you identify those areas, you can start working on them specifically.
Makes sense. Okay, so what about those of us who are more social learners? who enjoy learning with other people.
Well, for those folks, joining an online class or discussion group can be a game changer.
Yeah, there's something to be said about learning with a group. It just feels less daunting.
Absolutely. In a group setting, you get regular speaking practice. You receive feedback and you learn from others' experiences.
It's like having a built-in support system.
Exactly. And sometimes that's all you need to stay motivated.
I like that. So we've talked about language partners, AI chatbots, shadowing, recording ourselves, online classes.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, have you considered creating daily speaking challenges?
Ooh, daily challenges. I like that. What kind of challenges are we talking about?
It could be anything that gets you speaking.
Okay.
You know, maybe challenge yourself to talk about a specific topic for 5 minutes.
Or have a short conversation with a stranger in English. You could record yourself giving a presentation or even just describe your day in detail.
I love the variety. It's like finding those little opportunities to sprinkle English into your daily life.
Exactly. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
The key is to just start speaking and embrace those mistakes.
Mistakes are our friends. That's the spirit.
Awesome. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. It seems like there's a speaking strategy out there for everyone.
There is. And the most important thing is to find what works best for you.
Okay.
And to make practice a consistent part of your routine.
Right.
Fluency is a journey, not a destination.
I like that.
And it's a journey best taken with a sense of adventure
Okay.
and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone.
Well said. Speaking of stepping outside our comfort zones, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some deeper questions from the material
Okay.
and discuss how these principles can be applied beyond just learning English.
Sounds good.
Stay with us.
As we've been talking about these strategies for learning English,
Yeah.
one thing that really stood out to me from the source material was that sense of urgency.
Right.
You know, like that encouragement to just take action right away.
Absolutely. The source material really emphasizes that.
Yeah. It's so easy to get caught up in planning and researching different methods,
Right.
but ultimately action is key.
I agree. It's like that saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
Exactly. We can talk about learning English all day long,
Yeah.
but nothing really happens until we actually start doing it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming thing.
Right.
Even small steps, like changing your phone settings to English or listening to a short podcast, can make a big difference.
All about building momentum.
You got it.
Yeah.
Once you start taking those small actions, it becomes easier to keep going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this right now, I challenge you to take action,
Yes.
like right after you finish this episode.
Right now, what's one small thing you can do today to move closer to your fluency goals?
Don't overthink it. Just pick one thing and do it.
Exactly. It could be as simple as downloading a language learning app
Yeah.
or writing down a few English phrases.
Or even just saying hello to yourself in the mirror.
It's all about breaking down those mental barriers.
Absolutely.
And proving to yourself that you can do this.
You got this.
And we're here to support you every step of the way.
Now, before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
You know, we've been talking about how immersion and speaking practice can help you become fluent in English.
Right.
But what if these principles could be applied to other skills as well?
Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, could you immerse yourself in the world of coding by surrounding yourself with code, listening to programming podcasts, watching tutorials?
It's like you're creating that immersive environment
Exactly.
for a different skill.
Right. Or think about cooking. Could you improve your cooking skills by talking yourself through each step of a recipe?
Like you're teaching someone else how to do it.
Exactly.
It's a form of active learning.
Precisely. By immersing yourself in the environment and actively practicing the skill,
Yeah.
you create a powerful feedback loop that accelerates learning.
So what you're saying is that these principles,
Yeah.
the power of immersion in speaking practice,
Right.
could be applied to pretty much anything we want to learn.
That's the idea.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Wow.
It seems like the journey to fluency in any area of life starts with a willingness to embrace these principles
I think so.
and to experiment with different approaches.
Absolutely. And who knows what we might discover
Right.
when we step outside our comfort zones and embrace lifelong learning.
That's a great point. That's a great note to end on. So to our listener, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep pushing yourself beyond your limits.
Yes.
Until next time, happy learning.